Hello and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. Today, we are focusing on Mind Matters, prioritizing our mental wellness. Now, thank you everyone for joining us today. I wanted to note that we are going to be taking live audience questions. So be sure to put your questions into the comments function of LinkedIn, especially during our time together. We have a moderator here. We want to get to as many questions as possible. Now, I do want to share with you last month, I had the opportunity to take a tour at Kids Help Phone in Toronto, Ontario. During this tour, I bumped into our special guest today, Elisa Simon, who is the Executive Vice President of E-Mental Health Transformation and Chief Youth Officer at Kids Help Phone. And during our conversation, when we bumped into each other, Elisa, I know we couldn't stop talking. I knew that I needed to have you on here in our LinkedIn Live, especially because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So Elisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited for the conversation.
I am as well, and I know that we have a number of audience members joining as well. And again, please pop your answers, or sorry, not your answers, your questions into the comments function. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible. So Elisa, we do want to get into it. As you know, I have a few questions for you. And I want to start off with this. We talk about mental wellness, but what is your definition of mental wellness? And if you can share with us some daily practices that you would recommend for us to maintain that mental wellness, and this could be either personally or professionally, I think that would be a great way to kick us off.
Perfect. So really, there is a definition for what mental wellness is. I think about it as, am I comfortable in my own skin and in my life? Right. And so what I always am thinking about is, what can I do to make myself more comfortable in my life? There are some things that are proven, right? Getting outside, being with nature, even if you're not a nature person, even if you don't like bugs, being outside just changes the way that we feel. Exercising. Again, I am not a big exerciser, but taking a 10-minute walk, getting your blood moving, that helps. The other thing, it's interesting. A while ago, I was talking to somebody about, over the pandemic, I started puzzling. I never thought I was a puzzler. And they were like, well, of course you are, because you spend your time at work with big ideas and thinking boldly and really abstract thoughts. So in your free time, you need to use a different part of your brain. So of course, they thought it made complete sense that I like to focus in on, where does this piece go next to that piece? And so my advice sometimes is to think, what do you do for your work? And how can you maybe light up a different part of your brain when you're at home in order to do something different for your own wellness?
I love that, because you talk about being comfortable in your own skin. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, but thank you for sharing it in that way. And what's interesting is, and I don't know if you agree, but oftentimes when we're stressed or we're burnt out, or there's just so many things to do, we're overwhelmed, what ends up happening is we remove all those things that actually give us energy, like being outside, like exercising. And what we want to do is, we think that other things will give us more energy, but they don't. And so it's remembering these things, especially when we're tired, stressed out, or burnt out, that these are the things that are going to bring us energy. So that piece about being outdoors, exercise, movement, or even puzzling, it's what works best for you as well as your brain. So thank you for that. Now, I am going to talk about technology, and especially as it connects to mental health. Now, what we have to understand is that there's really two ways of looking at this, because technology can be helpful, right? And you know a lot about this. So let's first talk about kind of in which ways you might see technology negatively impacting mental wellness, and also how can social media and or technology be a positive force in promoting mental health awareness and community support. So two parts to that question for you.
Yeah. So the reality is, there is a lot of evidence showing the harms of social media. And we often think about it, particularly for girls. There's a lot of research on the negative impact on body image, the negative impact on sort of having an idealized version of yourself versus what really is happening in your heart and your head. And we know that social media connects us to people. We hear all the time from young people who maybe they think they're trans and they live in a remote part of Canada and they don't know anybody else like them. Social media has this incredible opportunity to connect you to others like you. It also, there's technology beyond social media. There are apps, there are tools that can help us with mindfulness, that can help us actually get out and take that walk. And so it really is a double-edged sword. I think the reality is we often talk about technology and its negative impacts on young people. And we forget that as adults, many of us have addictions to technology. We don't put our devices down, and we miss out on what's happening with our friends, our colleagues, our families, because we are glued to that device. And then we're upset that our kids are glued to them as well. But it is important that we recognize the role that technology is playing in our lives, and are we okay with that or not? I know for myself, sometimes I find myself now scrolling before bed where I used to always read. I saw myself as a reader. That was an important part of my identity. So I've actually been trying to put my phone down, but that is hard. The algorithms are meant to keep you scrolling, right? It's meant to go exactly to what you like and what you're interested in. So it's something we all have to work on.
I love that you're talking not just about youth, but also us as grown-ups and adults. And it is true, like we have our phones with us. And for me, I find it helpful to even put it in a completely separate room before going to bed, and quite a bit of time before we do go to bed. And so I think that's important, especially with technology, but it's also being aware of how much we use it. I know that we have a number of parents and guardians that are joining us live today. And if you've got questions as it relates to technology and your children or even yourself, again, please pop those questions into the chat function or the comment section of LinkedIn Live, and we are going to get to them. And so let's build on this. Let's build on this technology conversation in digital platforms. Based on your experience with digital platforms, how can organizations leverage technology to support mental health in the workplace? And when I was doing the tour at Kids Health Phone, I loved learning that, you are where the youth are. Right? You are trying to be exactly where the youth are. If we're talking about video games, if we're talking about school, wherever it might be, that's where you are. So what can organizations do to leverage technology?
Yeah, so I think one of the unique places we are in the world right now is at workplaces, we're seeing that people want to stay remote. And yet we as humans crave connection. And it is really hard to get that connection when you are fully remote, even though you love that you can work in your pajamas, right? And so I think a few things that I often think about is how can we bring people together, whether that is through technology or in person. We just brought our entire frontline staff together for the very first time since COVID. And the magic that happened by doing that, where people were saying how beautiful it was to put a face and a name and a body to what was just this floating head for the last few years. So technology can help with that, right? You can have drop-in meetings, you can have connections, you can use technology for brainstorming, but I really don't think anything takes away that face-to-face connection that we have. The other piece that workplaces can do, and we've done a lot of investment at Kids Health Phone, is how do we support our workforce to have the kinds of tools that make their jobs easier, their lives better? So again, can we help pay for tools and technology that help with mindfulness? Can we support technology that you don't have to pay for that helps you track your steps, maybe have competitions with each other so that you're getting out a little bit more? So certainly technology is something that we can look at as benefits for our staff. And understanding what your team needs, right? So we do a wellness survey with our team where we say, what would be most helpful to you? And when you have a remote staff, when you're all over the place, that can be challenging. It's hard to sometimes find those tools. There are absolutely ones out there, and your team will be really good at telling you, I don't want that. I'd love to have something like this.
I love that. I don't know if you're referring to me as it relates to wearing pajama pants right now or not, but we're not going to go there today, Elisa. We're just not going to go there.
No, we won't talk about it anymore.
No, but what you're saying is really important because, I mean, there is the hybrid remote in-person debate. And to be honest, I don't have a stance on that. It's what works best for the organization. But I think what you're emphasizing is that, in-person connection and connecting in person, it's different. It's different than connecting online. However, we can leverage technology, but it's looking at the tools that work best for your team. Right? My team works best using specific tools and may not using other tools. You have to understand your team. And I want to add into what you're saying. It could also just be checking in with them, right? Like on a scale of 1 to 5, where's your energy level today? And sometimes it's checking in and maybe they feel more comfortable sharing anonymously or whatever it might be. But doing that check-in is so important.
Now, and that's the humanity,
yes.
right? Sorry, it's just part of it is, I think it's really important for all of us to remember that behind the worker, there's a person. right? And so one of the things that I've worked really hard on over COVID in particular was, can we have time where we're just having fun? Let's play a game. We played a game over COVID with some of my leadership team on whose fridge is it? And we took pictures of our fridge. It was ridiculous, but it was fun, right? Because it humanizes us. And that's what you
Love
miss
it.
in the remote workplace is you don't have that moment to just walk by and go, hey, how was the soccer game your kid was in yesterday? So how do you bring that kind of humanizing place or piece to remote or hybrid work?
And emojis are not the answer. To my Women of Influence Plus team, we might be playing this game of whose fridge is it? I've never heard of that one. I love it.
You
Thank
might
you
have
for
made it
that.
up.
I love it. Can we talk a little bit about AI? Because we're talking about technology, we're talking about digital platforms. And I mean, AI seems a bit scary to some of us, right? And it can be scary and it cannot be scary. But what potential do you see for AI in monitoring and providing early interventions for mental health issues? Because it can. And I think that's quite powerful.
Yeah. So I would say AI is scary because a lot of us don't understand it,
Yes.
right? Its power is tremendous. So at Kids Help Phone, we have the largest data set for youth mental health in Canada. And we have the real words of young people, over 1 million conversations of how young people are actually talking about the challenges they face. And we are now leveraging those transcripts, that data, to be able to support our frontline better at understanding what's the issue that young people are bringing to us. But also, we then, as you were saying, we can build it out. Can we predict what young people are talking about? Can we better understand when a young person talks about A, if we say B, it's most helpful. If we say C, it's not. And the way to do that is through large data models where you're using AI to learn in a way that humans, it would take us forever to do. So I would say we need to embrace AI with a mindset of AI for good. Because if we don't, if we as women and caregivers and mothers or whatever role we play, if we just say others will deal with this and I'm just going to be scared, we could end up with some really scary products. If we go in and say, here's how we want it to be used, here's what we need, and we want it to be AI for good, let's build tools that actually make it easier. So we're building things for our front line because they're there for young people across Canada. We need to be a part of that conversation instead of too scared of it.
I love it. AI for good. We need to be a part of the conversation
Yes.
instead of avoiding and not being a part of it, because what happens when we're not a part of it? And I do need to actually take a moment to say thank you to you and your entire organization for what you have done and what you continue to do for youth. It's phenomenal. I've been a huge fan and a huge supporter for a number of years because it's not easy. And especially with what happened during the pandemic and what you have built is phenomenal. So thank you. I do need to take a moment to say that.
Thank you.
Now, my next question for the parents and guardians tuning in, navigating the mental health challenges faced by today's youth can be daunting. We know this. And Elisa, you've touched on it a little bit during our conversation today. What guidance would you offer to support them in this journey?
Yeah. So I'm a parent. So I offer guidance to others, but I also try and take that guidance myself, which is hard. The first thing is start early. When you have little kids, talk to them about well-being. If it works for you to do something like mindfulness or be out in nature, bring them out there so that they're starting to build some of those tools. Bring them to the Kids Help Phone website so that they understand help is available. Put our phone number on your fridge. Let your young people know if you ever want to talk, I'm here for you. But sometimes you might not want to talk to me. And a place like Kids Help Phone is here, and you can use my phone and I won't ask any questions. Because the biggest thing for kids is they need to know there's a safe place that they can reach out. And look, as a parent, I hope my daughter will come to me. I also know she probably won't. Because as kids developmentally age, part of their job is to push parents away and to become more self-sufficient. And so we have to make sure, is it a coach? Is it a teacher, an aunt, an uncle? Who is it that they can go and talk to? And then if your kids are experiencing challenges, if you notice their behavior is different, if you're noticing they're crying a lot or they're withdrawing, ask questions. But the hardest thing, and again, I struggle with this as a parent, is to listen. Because our hearts hurt when our kids' hearts hurt. right? In a way that is unimaginable. Like before you're a parent, you can't know what that's going to be like. And so you have to sit in your hurt so that your kid can tell you what's going on and not just rush to fix it. Let them have their feelings, let them have that space, connect them to a place like Kids Help Phone. We also have the largest database of services and supports across Canada. So if they need mental health services, if they need a 2S LGBTQ support group, we can help connect them to those things as well. I think one of the power of Kids Help Phone is that it's one of the only things kids can own themselves. They don't need a health card. They don't need a parent. They can come to us. And that sense of autonomy for kids is powerful. But it is not easy as an adult to have a young person who's struggling in your life. And I think you also have to give yourself some grace to understand that.
Thank you. And as a parent myself, I have a 7.5-year-old son. And so I'm listening. And when you're saying it's about listening with your children, I think there's two parts to that: listening without judgment and sitting with it. Even though you might feel some things, you have to sit with that. But the other piece is listening without trying to fix it right away. Because as guardians, that's what we want to do. We want to fix things because we care. But that leads to toxic positivity. Right? Don't worry about it. It's okay. You'll feel better. You'll get past it. When we do that, we actually dismiss their emotions, right? And we try to cover it up when all they really want is someone to listen. And I know with Kids Help Phone, you can call in or you can text. So there are various different ways that children can connect. And even for adults, there are a number of tools for us if we want to connect as well. So thank you for that. And I know the Women of Influence Plus team is going to be posting some resources in the comment section. Again, if you have questions for Elisa as it relates to mental health, whether it's with youth in the workplace, as we're talking about technology, please pop them into the comments function, and we will get to as many questions as we can in the last little bit that we have together.
And you know, Ramit, I forgot to give my number one advice, which is terrible because I forget it sometimes as a parent. I don't know where I read this, but I loved it, which is to ask your kids or your partner or your friend, do you want to be heard, helped, or hugged?
Oh, I love
that. I always forget it in the moment. So I wanted to make sure to say it because that then allows them to make the decision. I want to be helped. Help me through this. What should I do? Just give me a hug or just listen to me and let me talk. So heard, helped, or hugged.
I love that. Now, if we translate that into the workplace, maybe hugged is not the right word. Maybe we take that out. Maybe it's heard, helped, or supported, right? We need a third word there, but I am going to use that with my son. Thank you for that. That's powerful because they then get to dictate and share what it is that they need versus us assuming. Thank you for that. Okay, I want to shift gears into, we're talking a lot about technology, but we know beyond that, especially as it relates to mental well-being, mental health, I want to talk about community and mentorship and let's go there. Let's go into mentorship as well as community. So as women leaders, why do you personally believe that mentorship is crucial for our community, and how does it contribute to supporting the next generation?
Yeah, mentorship is critical. And what that looks like to you can be really different. But I'll tell you, I had a great conversation with a young person who reached out to me last week and, wrote this lovely email. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm wondering if you have any time. I will always have time for young people to talk about how did I get to where I am? What advice would I have? And that's because, I think it's important. Sometimes I want to retire. I want smart, amazing people to take my job. But also, I was a young person who graduated university, didn't know what I wanted to do. And somebody said, what's the number one job you think would be really amazing? And I thought about what it was. And they said, well, then call someone that has that job. And I did. I cold called because didn't have email that I was using at the time. And I said, I someday might want to have what you do. Like, how'd you get there? And it shaped what I got my master's on. I'm not doing that job, but it helped give me some direction and help me feel okay with what some next steps are. And that power that we have as women leaders to be able to say, I can give you a half hour. Absolutely. I can give you a half hour. I can tell you my story. I can listen to your story. I can give advice if you want. And I can also let you know it's okay not to know, because where you will be when you're my age is different than where you think you'll be right now. And that's okay too.
I love that because it's not about the what. It's not about what you're going to be. It's about who you're going to be.
Yeah.
And that can be translated into so many different job titles or positions. But it's more about who you are. And I love that you've zoned in on that. Thank you. We are going to go into some audience questions. I've got the first one. And again, audience, post your questions into the comments section. My first question is, what advice do you have regarding setting boundaries in order to manage our mental wellness, especially given our always on digital world? I think that's a fantastic question because I love boundaries, Elisa. And sometimes other people within my community or my family or friends or whoever I'm connected with, they don't like my boundaries too much. So how do you, like, what advice do you have with regards to setting them?
It is hard, right? It is challenging, particularly in a workplace, but even at home. It's hard, particularly if you've got little kids who don't necessarily understand boundaries. I think the first thing is for you to give a little bit of thought of what is it that you need to do for your well-being, right? And that includes, if we're talking about work, what do I need to do to succeed at work, right? And then how do those two things come together? So, for example, I have people, including myself, that will say, you know what, I'm going to come in early to work so that I can leave early to get home to be there with my family. And I am not going to be online for an hour or two so that I can have dinner with my family. But don't worry, for me, I'm fine going back online afterwards, catching up on email, doing some work because I can't get it done otherwise. But first of all, know what will work for you. Be clear in explaining why, because if I just try and text somebody or Slack them at 4 p.m. and they're not there, I'll be like, where are they? Why aren't they there? If I know they leave at 4 so they can be with their kid, but at 5:30 they'll answer, or at 6 they'll answer, or at 8:30 the next morning, I feel more comfortable with that. And then also know, when do you need to make exceptions, right? There are times where things are just, there's a big conference happening, there's an event, there's something, and you actually need to be able to flex that boundary a little bit so that you can do what you need to do for work.
I love it. Have your boundaries, but express the reason as to why. And so I respond to all of my emails at basically 5 a.m., between 5 and 7 a.m., because I get up very early, but I shut off. When I do pick up, I leave 3:30 p.m., I'm off, and that's my time. But it's not that I work less hours. My hours are just different.
Exactly.
But the addition to that is everyone who knows me and is connected with me knows that they should not be responding between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. because those are my hours. That's not their hours.
Yeah.
But communicating that is important. And I think for organizations listening, though, is you need to create a space where people feel comfortable to share why those boundaries are important. Because I was talking to someone and I had that clear boundary. And she had said, I'm afraid to tell people I have to leave to do pickup. And she shouldn't be afraid in order to do that.
Yeah.
All right. So set your boundaries, but explain and share why those boundaries exist, and that can help manage that. Next question. When someone at work or home seems to be having a difficult time, what is the best way to ask them if they need help? And how do you sensitively reach out to someone you're sensing is not doing well? Thank you for this question. Such a powerful one.
Yeah. So it is hard for all of us when somebody we love or care about is facing a challenge. And we notice it often from a behavior change, right? We notice it that they're just not acting themselves in some way. So the best thing is to just ask and maybe start with, I've been noticing that you just don't seem fully yourself. Do you want to take a quick walk, or would you like to talk? And just letting somebody know, A, that you're noticing, B, that you care, and C, that you're there for them. And sometimes, particularly at work, sometimes people will open up, sometimes they won't. Mm-hmm. But giving them that opportunity is what's really important. Instead of just pretending you haven't noticed anything, it's all fine. And that person then knows that maybe they could come to you at a later time. The other thing I just have to say is always check in and make sure people are safe. Yes. If you think that somebody is really struggling, ask them if they are thinking of harming themselves or thinking about suicide. People often are scared of that because they're afraid that even by mentioning it, it might bring up that thought in people's heads. Yeah. The research is very clear. Asking about suicide does not lead people to think more about suicide. What it does is it allows them the space to go, actually, yeah, I am thinking about that. And then you can open it up to a conversation. So I think really checking in, asking, noticing, showing that you care about people as humans beyond whatever their role is at work or their role is at home.
And let's build on that. So for the leaders, when you work in an organization, understanding what resources are available within your organization. So if someone does disclose whether they're being harmed or they may engage in self-harm or they are engaging in self-harm, we need to be equipped with the resources that are available. Check out the Kids Help Phone website, know what's available within your organization, be ready to be able to offer that, because to your point, people may want to share, but they may not. We have no idea what someone else is going through, but if we can equip ourselves with the tools in order to share, whether they need them or not, we won't know. But to your point, we've now created an environment where they feel comfortable to come to us, but we also have resources to share with them.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the next one. I often put my self-care on the back burner and prioritize my kids' work, etc. How can we teach ourselves and our kids about the importance of proactive self-care? I love all the questions that are coming in, and they all resonate because I agree with that. You know, we put ourselves and our own self-care in the back burner, whether we're parents or guardians or not. That's often the case. So advice, thoughts, how do we teach ourselves and show the little ones in our lives?
So the reality is I'm not an expert on this. I struggle with it myself. I'll tell you some of the things that I do. So one thing I do is I set an alarm sometimes on my phone to remind me to do something that is good for me. If I'm working at home, I will sometimes look down at my phone and I will see I've done 400 steps for the entire day. So I will set a reminder that says, or I'll put in my calendar, take a walk. So I then at least get that push to get myself outside. I have started to say to my partner or my husband, when we get into bed, can you remind me to stop scrolling so I pick up my book? You can ask the people in your life to be a part of helping you to do self-care. There's somebody in the office here that often goes on a walk over lunch. And I said to her, whenever you're going out, it's nice outside, will you just come by and see if I'm available? Because when she does that, it is more likely I will get up and do it. So find those tips, people, reminders, apps that will help poke you, because the reality is we will all sit and do whatever we're prioritizing as important, and often taking care of ourselves, bringing ourselves joy, making sure our bodies and minds are doing well falls way down that list. And again, we have to show our kids how to do that, or they learn the same thing from us.
So what you've just shared there is how we can use technology in one way to poke us and to remind us. I have this very delicious coconut cake in the fridge right now, and I need to put a reminder in to make sure I don't forget it's in there because it's so good. But what I'm hearing you say is the reminders, right? The reminders to help us and to ask our community and the people around us to also be a part of that. And that's, I think, how we can teach our kids as well. So wonderful question. We are at time, Elisa. We appreciate you so much. You've taken time out of your busy day and the important work that you are doing. We are so appreciative of all that you do and everyone at Kids Help Phone and what you've achieved so far, but also your big plans for the future. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit the Kids Help Phone website, I encourage you to do so. Share the resources. We do hope everyone who's joined us today has enjoyed the conversation. I know I have so many takeaways. Do you want to be heard, helped, or hugged, among so many more? But even that definition of well-being, which we kicked off today, being comfortable in our own skin. And I think for all of us watching today, asking ourselves that question, am I comfortable in my own skin? And if I'm not, what needs to change, right? What needs to change? So Elisa, thank you so, so much for taking time today. Thank you to the entire audience for joining us today. We will be back on June 10th for our next LinkedIn Live. I'm Ramit Billen, CEO of Women of Influence Plus. It has been a pleasure to have this conversation with all of you. Until we meet again, please take good care of yourselves and of each other. Elisa, thank you again.
Thank you. Be well, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.